it. Hello, Ranveer. Hello, Rikin. Hello, Jess. Hello, Buthana. Welcome. So good to see you. We're talking about data, and Jess said, can we get nerdy? Absolutely, it's mandatory. Jess, introduce yourself to our global audience. Tell them who you are and what you do.
Great, thanks for having me. My name is Jess Fonza. I'm a professor at Johns Hopkins University, and I co-lead the Food Systems Dashboard.
Nice to see you. We're looking forward to hearing about that in just a moment. Rikin, welcome. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Thanks. I'm Rikin Gandhi, co-founder of Digital Green, where we use peer-to-peer videos to improve extension systems and are also developing governance mechanisms for sharing data through an initiative called FarmStack.
Fantastic. These are great projects, right? Ranveer, welcome to the conversation. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hi, I'm Ranveer Chandra. I am the CTO for Agriculture and Food at Microsoft. I started the Farm Beats project, which is about bringing data and artificial intelligence to agriculture.
Welcome. And finally, Buthana, nice to see you. Tell everybody who you are and your job title. What do you do?
Hi, Buthana Gormazi. I'm Director for Digital Development in the World Bank. So we work with governments to make sure they have the foundation for digital development. And then we work with sectors to make sure that these opportunities in digital translate into actual results in different sectors.
So I'm going to start with a 101 question, and it's an instant response, not a long response panel, but the importance of data in agriculture. What example would you give me? Rikin, you start.
I would say farmers have data in their own minds about how they plan what crops and livestock to be producing, and they integrate in their minds weather, soil, information to be able to make sense of it, to make the best decisions that they can.
Ranveer,
yeah, and there is,
data and agriculture. Go ahead.
Yeah, in addition to what Rikin said, there is data from the farm that that sensors can collect, that drones can collect, satellites are collecting. This is data that can complement a farmer's knowledge. So the knowledge that Rikin talked about can be complemented with data and artificial intelligence to create insights. Like, for example, telling a farmer when to plant, when to harvest, when to water, when to sell a crop, when to harvest it. All of that information is data that, if captured and shared and used with AI, can unlock a lot of benefits in digital agriculture for the growers.
Jess?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of data out there, and in the dashboard, we collect data across the entire food systems, with agriculture being one piece of it. So there's a lot of data, but it's putting it in one place, putting it on accessible platforms that users will use. So one of the big challenges we have is, we can talk about challenges around data and the quality of data, but it's accessing that data. How do you pull it together in one place that's easy to use and a visual interface? That's the challenge, but the opportunity at the same time.
Buthana?
Well, I think about big data. I think about data analytics. I think about using cell phone crowdsourced information, different types of data that are all important to get insights. Insights that can inform actions for better decision making, for better actions, and it's a deep sector because there is so much wealth of data out there. The challenge and the issue is, how do we use it? How do we harness it? How do we protect it? How do we make sure it gets to the best use?
I am thinking right now about the title of our session, Enabling More Equitable Access to Data, Clear Data Governance. That was another phrase that jumped out at me. And supportive of e-agriculture strategies. Those were the buzzwords that really leapt out at me. This idea about equitable access, Rikin. Tell me what you're doing and how that fits in to that idea.
So there's two main things. One is to use peer-to-peer videos that are buy-in for farmers to share best practices with one another. And the second is to say, that a lot of the data that organizations, including us and our government partners, collect about and for farmers is mostly siloed and essentially stored by our individual selves and for our own organizational benefits without little return for the farmers themselves to lay claim to their data, to be able to monetize their data. And that's what we're trying to work on with FarmStack, is to enable farmers to maintain their own data wallet and set their own usage policies on, if I'm going to share my data with somebody else, I'm going to enforce the types of terms and conditions on top of it.
Ravi, I see you nodding. Articulate the nod.
Yeah, and it goes, we're working with Rikin on this, is essentially how do you enable people to share data rather than bring in silos, and so that this data can be shared without sacrificing the privacy of the data. Some of this data it contains PII information. In the wrong hands, it can be used the wrong way. So how do you ensure that this data can be shared in an appropriate way? Because if this data is shared, as the other panelists mentioned as well, it can unlock a lot of new value. So some of the work we are doing is on enabling this secure sharing of data, creating a platform that can allow this sharing of data. Part of it is that. The other part is around how do you add structure to the data? How do you make that data discoverable in the first place? So those are some of the things we are working on at Microsoft to enable this sharing of data, to build that kind of a platform that Rikin mentioned.
You're raising good questions. I'm hearing a lot of a hows. Do you then have, this is how we do it then?
Yeah, these
Go
are
ahead.
some of the ways in which we can make it happen. That is, you need secure ways of sharing data, ways to add structure to data, to semi-structured data, because a lot of data could just be hand notes that people have written. They are not in a particular format. So then how do you add structure to the data? How do you make this data discoverable? What data exists where with which grower? How do you create this repository? So these are all the hows of how you'll enable this kind of a data platform. But one of the problems that Rikin mentioned is, without these, the problems right now are, well, this data is very siloed. It exists at the growers, at different farm organizations. And unless you bring all of this data together, you won't unlock the values of the benefits of artificial intelligence. All these things that we talk about won't come to agriculture unless we start bringing them all together.
Just can you take us in a little deeper into the food systems dashboard?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the questions being and some of the conversation we're having around this equity, we really saw this a lot with the development of the food systems dashboard, and that we tried to pull together indicators across the entire food system. So this is starting with agriculture, but all the way to diets. And we really struggled around access issues. Private sector, food industry holds a lot of data, particularly around behavior change. What drives decision making around diet choices? What drives decision making about what farmers are going to plant or harvest? And private sector has a lot of that data, but they won't release that, or it's behind a paywall. So we really struggle with access issues. We try to have data across every country in the world. And so, of course, places like the United States has a lot of data. USDA holds a lot of data, but other countries have very outdated data or don't have any data. So there's real inequities in the geographical coverage of data as well. So we tried to pull that together as much as possible to allow for policymakers to not work in the dark when thinking about food systems. But we're faced with some of these access issues, equity issues around geographic coverage. So
do you have conversations with the private sector about access to data, or is that just, that's not going to happen? It's not realistic. Or do they just like, you're knocking on the door and they're like, bye?
It's hard because it's it's proprietary, and when they release that data, they're releasing it to their potential competitors. So they have a lot of data on consumer behavior that is important for their branding. And what's the incentive for them to release that data to a global access, open access dashboard?
There is
it's hard
also
to
this
sell that.
risk.
Yeah.
Yes, there's also that risk that is this contains sensitive information. How do you share this data without making sure that the data is not compromised? It doesn't fall in the
That's
hands of
true.
wrong people. Being from the
Yeah.
private sector, I'm just representing another viewpoint.
Ranveer, I forgot for a moment.
We can't say anything bad.
Ranveer,
Can't say
you're a
anything
very
bad about
nice private sector person. Rikin, go ahead.
One related question. I mean, Ranveer or Jess. I think like for the type of aggregate data, right, that you might use on a dashboard or for artificial intelligence types of purposes, right? There's power of obviously bringing this data together. But then, as you also said, there's also this individual, perhaps like private or proprietary information for the individual farmer, right? How do you sort of think about bringing those two levels of aggregate data and an individual's own data sort of together while still having equity and ability for governance across those two very different types of data?
That is a fantastic question. Do you have a fantastic answer?
I don't know.
I could start I could start, and Jess, you should add to this. But you and I are talking quite a bit about this in like how do you get this data shared without compromising without compromising privacy of the whoever owns that data. And I think some of it would have to come down to consortiums and nonprofits and people coming together to define the use cases and defining the standards as to what data needs to be shared, and making sure you have some guarantees around it that, you know what, if you share this aggregate data, you're not leaking any individual data in the process. And for the purpose it is, I think that's what's going to define what needs to be shared. For example, for the food systems dashboard that Jess is developing of FarmStack, what is that data? What is the data model? What is the aggregation at a level where you can't extract individual information, but there is still sufficient information for FarmStack or the food systems dashboard or any such other system to make use of that data. So I think this kind of a consortium as standard is needed. Some sort of an open source model would be good, but having people work behind the scenes to have some proofs so that it's not just on best effort or people just say, but you can prove it that, you know what, you're not sacrificing an individual's privacy by sharing this aggregate data. I think that kind of research R&D is needed.
Let me just
Can
bring
I
in
also
Buthena
mention?
here, Buthena, because
Yes, thank you.
go ahead. Yes,
Also,
I was thinking about you, and you were thinking about jumping in. So we're aligned.
Exactly.
Go ahead,
Thank you
Buthena.
so much. No, I wanted to highlight the importance of the other elements of the ecosystem. Elements around the overall policy and regulatory environment around using data, but also the issues around skills, the issues around entrepreneurship. And, you know, the approach that we're using in the bank is to think about, you know, data empowerment within the broader framework around digital transformation. So from having access to connectivity, to the skills, to the entrepreneurship, to the ability to use financial inclusion. And I think these elements are important ones regardless of the sector. Agriculture, I think, is a sector par excellence, where when these foundations together work, we see the impact on the farmers and on the whole food system. So a very good sector where working closely between public and private, putting the foundations and seeing the imagination that, you know, young entrepreneurs are having in this sector. It's amazing.
Thank you, Buthena. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Ranveer, and thank you, Rikin. It just goes to show public and private can work so beautifully together, as they just did in this panel. Thank you, panel. Appreciate you. And now we're going to look at innovation. Let me give you a little example of what I mean. Take a look at this.
I'm Simone. I'm the founder and CEO of Plantix. Plantix is a digital crop doctor for farmers. It's a smartphone app, actually the most downloaded app for small-scale farmers worldwide with more than 15 million downloads. We help farmers to identify crop diseases, pest attacks, nutrient deficiencies. The farmer just need to take an image of the plant with their smartphone, and our app gives the result within seconds. How? we use AI, or more technically machine learning, to train digital plant experts. The beauty of digital experts, they are available at any time, wherever you need them. They can talk to thousands or millions of farmers at the same time. They are not only experts for 1 or 2 crops, but for 60 crops, and they're more accurate than human experts. And they become more intelligent over time, since it's a self-enforcing system. With every image we get, the better becomes the digital experts. And on top of all these images we get, we understand how plant diseases are spreading across the countries, and we understand what farmers are growing. So that's data which is normally produced when people go into the village and do surveys. But by simply using our service, farmers produce this information digital and in real time. However, it's also a challenge to integrate ICT tools into farming, as for many farmers, it's the first time they use digital technology. You have to design it that it is accessible for farmers and runs on the often cheap and older phones they predominantly use. So in order to be successful, that needs to be easy to use, intuitive, as many farmers used phones only for calling or WhatsApp before. But if you manage this, you can create something really powerful. So at Plantix, we deeply believe that technology is key to a more sustainable agriculture. Only if we find a scalable solution to support farmers, we can have an impact. Since, I mean, we talk about more than 500 million farms, which means at least 1 billion people working in agriculture. Mark Andreessen once said, software is eating the world. However, we say with Plantix, we help to feed the world.